Link 15. So now what do we do? We were walking back up Parkway. The sun was going down. Gail shrugged. What Nick suggested, I suppose. Keep an eye on this chap and hope he slips up. I think we should warn people. Don't go off with anyone. You'd think they'd know that anyway. One thing we need to know is what he looks like. I nodded. We'll get Nick to point him out on Monday. Why not now or tomorrow? I shook my head. He won't be around. Nick, I mean. He lives in a squat, but I don't know where. We could try and spot the guy ourselves, get the address from Captain Hook. I scoffed. He won't give it. It's his own address, Gail. He'd think we're planning to do it over his place. He'd think we were planning to do his place over. She grinned. I think he'll tell me, if I'm by myself. You take my pack and wait here. I waited on the canal bridge. It was dusk and turning a bit nippy. I shivered, and it wasn't just the cold. I was thinking about Ginger, and Tanya, who liked to be called Toya, and her dad, who said bless you and shoved a fiver in my hand. I was thinking about Gail, too, how she changed my life for the better, but how, whenever I thought of her, a faint unease would stir somewhere deep inside, a sensation I strove to smother or ignore. Cool chick, Nick had called her, but it wasn't quite that. She was cool, but there was something else, a sort of poise, a self-possession which jarred with her circumstances. Seems a funny thing to say, but she wasn't screwed up enough. I must have known, too, deep down, but I kept shoving it away. It was as if a dream was a warm dream and I didn't want to wake. She was back in a few minutes, smiling. 9 Mornington Place, she chirped, shouldering her pack. I nodded but didn't say anything, and we set off along the high street. It was a biggish 3-storey house in a short Victorian terrace. There was a minute, sour-looking front garden in which 3 dustbins took up most of the space. There was no gate. A short path led from the gateway to the white door. No light showed in any of the windows. Nobody home, said Gail. We were standing in the shadow of some budding sycamores across the street. Let's hang about a bit, I murmured. Looking at the place made me shiver. The video inside my skull came on, and I saw Ginger following a shadowy figure up to the white door. Is that how it happened, I wondered? When exactly? Where was I at that moment? And why had Ginger followed him? Ginger and Toya and possibly others. Why? Gail had a watch. We waited 45 minutes. Nobody went in. Nobody came out. A woman kept coming to the lighted upstairs window next door and seeming to look straight at us. She probably couldn't even see us, but it made us nervous. If you're homeless, it's not smart to be found loitering in a residential area, especially after dark, and she might just phone the police. Come on, I said. We'll try again tomorrow. Sunday, we were back under the sycamores by 8:30. It was dry, but the sun was still behind the houses, so it was nippy too. All the curtains were closed at number 9. I wished me and Gail were having a lie-in like the bastards in those rooms. A good night's sleep in a comfy bed, lie until about 10, breakfast of eggs and bacon, toast and coffee, eaten slowly in a warm kitchen. Paradise. And millions take it completely for granted. Our man, if it was our man, didn't lie in till 10. Just before 9, the door opened a crack and a black and white cat shot out, followed by a hand. This hand groped for the pint of milk on the doorstep, found it and pulled it in through the crack. The door closed, and a minute later the downstairs curtain opened. Gail and I took a stroll along the road and watched from the corner. After about 10 minutes, a guy came out, closing the door behind him. He was a big man in his 40s. He wore an Iran sweater and a cord trousers and had very short sandy hair. As he came down the path, the cat, which had been sitting on the wall, jumped down and fled. The man turned left and strode off along the street. What do you want to do? Said Gail. Follow? Nah, he's not going far. He's not dressed for it. Probably off for a paper. I was right. He was back in 5 minutes with a thickish roll of Sunday reading tucked under his arm. He turned into the gateway without noticing us and let himself into the house with a latchkey. Do you reckon that's our man, then? Gail shrugged. Well, it wasn't Captain Hook, and he seems to live on the ground floor, so I'd say, yes, that's our man. But he looks so ordinary. He might look ordinary, Link. We don't know he's done... He might be ordinary, Link. We don't know he's done anything, do we? The police found nothing suspicious. We know he was seen with Ginger and Toya, I said, just before they disappeared, and I know I'd give my left arm for a look inside that house. Gail nodded. Me too. But it's not possible. All we can do is watch. So we watched. We saw the cat return and sit there where the milk bottle had been. We didn't see the upstairs curtains open, but when we sauntered by on the other side at 9:30, they were open. The sun had cleared the housetops and we strolled in watery sunshine under the trees. We didn't like to stand in one place too long in case we drew attention to ourselves, and there's a limit to the number of times you can walk up and down the same short street without somebody noticing. It was dead boring anyway, and it didn't look as though our man was coming out, so at 10:15 we decided to pack it in till evening. The cat was still on the doorstep when we left. It was the business with the cat that fooled me. You can say what you like, but there's something reassuring about a cat. I mean, you say you saw some guy fussing with his cat, fondling it and talking to it and chuckling over it. You wouldn't think, oh, there goes a dangerous man, there goes a killer, I better steer clear of him. Well, you wouldn't, would you? You'd probably think, look at him, great soft lump. Anyway, that's my excuse for what happened to me that evening. But I guess I better start at the beginning. First off, there was the rain. It had been a lovely morning, sunny and warm, but around 12 it clouded over and began to pour. Gail and I were tapping along the high street when it started, so all we did was move under the rail bridge and carry on. The weather didn't seem to deter the punters. The market was seething as usual, and we did all right. But it was the rain that led to our fight. We never fought, Gail and me. We felt the same way about most things, and so we got along fine. But when it started to get dark that Sunday evening and I suggested it was time to get back to Mornington Place, she said, not me, not in this stuff. What stuff? I cried. What are you on about, Gail? The rain, dummy. I'm not standing in the rain till God knows what time, waiting for some Dumbo who'll probably decide to stay home and keep dry. But we agreed. We said we'd go back tonight. It wasn't raining then. And anyway, I've got a couple of things to see to. Like what? Phoning your sister? Again? We'd both eat better if you didn't shove so much dosh in the damn phone. It's my dosh, Link. I can do with it what I like. And anyway, I'm not phoning my sister. I've got other things to do. Oh, and they're none of my business, right? Right. Well, shove off and do them then. Only don't expect me to hang around like I'm your dog or something until you decide to come back. I'll be in Mornington Place if you want me. And that's how I came to be alone in Mornington Place when the cat business happened. It was a miserable vigil. Miserable. I was even more down than when Ginger disappeared. I stood under the dripping trees. They weren't in leaf enough to keep the rain out, and thought about Gail. I hadn't meant for us to fight. I loved her. It was just that I'd spent all day thinking about Ginger and Toyah and 9 Mornington Place. I saw a movie once, 10 Rillington Place, about this sick killer who lured women into his house and murdered them. It was a true story. The title, 10 Rillington Place, had a ring to it. And in my imagination, 9 Mornington Place was beginning to have the same ring. I'd more or less convinced myself that horrible things had been done in the house and that it was down to me to expose them. I don't know what time it was when the door opened. I must seem to have been there for hours. I was soaked and freezing, and I'd more or less decided to jack it in and go make up with Gail, when suddenly there he was. The guy we'd been watching that morning. The very ordinary guy who wore cords and kept a moggy and liked to read the Sunday papers. He was standing on the doorstep, silhouetted against the dim light which spilled through the doorway. He was calling softly, Sappho, here, Sappho. I stood absolutely still way back under the sycamores. He was obviously calling a cat, probably the one we'd seen earlier, but no cat appeared. After a minute or so, the guy went inside, leaving the door ajar. I watched the strip of light, and in a moment he reappeared, carrying a dish. He squatted and put the dish on the step. Sappho, he called, striking the dish gently with a fork or spoon. Sappho, come on, meat. He was in shirt sleeves and must have felt cold, but he persisted, calling, and no cat appeared. Presently he straightened up and came shuffling down to the gateway in carpet slippers with a fork in his hand, peering left and right, calling. I thought, this is your monster? Your serial killer? A guy who will stand in shirt sleeves in the rain, calling his cat? Oh, come on. It was then that he spotted me. I knew he'd seen me. I wasn't scared. What's scary about a guy who can't find his pussycat? Embarrassed is what I was. Embarrassed because it must have been obvious I'd been watching him. I started to move away, but he called out, I say, excuse me. I looked across. Me? Yes, you haven't by any chance seen a cat, have you? A black and white cat? I shook my head. Oh, pity. She hates the rain, you see, detests it. I felt sure she'd be waiting on the step, especially since it's her supper time. Oh, I do hope nothing's... He broke off and looked at me. Oh, I say, I'm most terribly sorry. He looked sorry. Here I am, fussing about a silly cat, and there you are, soaked to the skin. Have you nowhere to go, young man? I shook my head. It's terrible, terrible. He stood looking at me, fiddling with a fork. I could tell he didn't know what to say. I'll be off then, I mumbled. Yes, he nodded, but continued to stare. And as I turned away, he said, I suppose you're hungry? I'm all right. I'd started to walk away. Would have got clean away if the cat hadn't appeared at that moment, scampering under a streetlight. Sappho, I turned. The creature ran to him and he lifted it, cradled it in his arms, crooning, rocked it like a baby, burying his face in its wet fur, oblivious to the rain, which was drenching him. The great soft noodle. And to think I turned away. Young man, huh? Can I offer you something to eat or, I don't know, a couple of quid? He dithered, anxious to do something for me, but worried that his offer might offend. There's a coat, a good one I don't use anymore. You're welcome to that if it'll help. I wasn't hungry, but I was cold and wet and the coat sounded tempting. I nodded. The coat will be... Thanks. He smiled and began shuffling back into the house, cradling the cat. I followed. It was as simple as that.